8:52, time for us to turn our attention to the weekend's hurling, and I'm delighted to say Aidan Taggy Fogarty is with us. Aidan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, guys. How are you?
Very interesting weekend of hurling results. Many teams in crisis. Some teams who we thought were in crisis suddenly wriggle off the crisis hook. Looking at you, Wexford and Cork. Let's start though with what we're all looking forward to now most over the next couple of weeks is a 2-week build-up to the next handshake between Henry Shefflin and Brian Cody. You couldn't have scripted it, or you could, and we all would have lapped it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a strange weekend of hurling. All right. Yeah, geez, a lot of teams there, but thought at the beginning of the year were contenders for the All-Ireland. Just went out with a flop. But 2 weeks time, Kilkenny and Galway. Yeah, in Croke Park. It's going to be very interesting. I think the media and everyone else will be building up the handshake. As I said before, I wonder will leave the show the game. Will it just be the handshake for 70 minutes? It'll be very interesting to see what the story is. But it's going to be a total different game. Obviously, Galway pipped us in Salt Hill a couple of weeks ago, and that'll be a bit of a driving force for this Kilkenny team. And they won't like that, and it will it'll drive them on a little bit. With Kilkenny, it's hard to know. Like the weekend, it's really week on week with this Kilkenny team. They annihilated Dublin. They played a direct ball, which they didn't get really much. Dublin didn't really put them up to them at all there at the back, and Kilkenny just drove right through them. But Wexford, in fairness to them, came out Saturday night, dropped back O'Keefe, played more of a kind of a defensive system, like they're kind of used to before. You know, lads were giving out about Davy, about how they set up, but maybe that's the way Wexford have to play, you know, attack from deep and drop back. And Kilkenny just were 6s or 7s, I felt, and they went back to what we discussed before about just lumping ball into the full forward line and not get much result from it. But in 2 weeks' time, Gerard, I think the whole thing is it's going to be a total different game. You know, this championship is just so much on momentum and gaining new players and players coming into form, and the mentality of week-on-week games, the psychology of coming off a big, massive result one weekend, going into maybe a lesser game the weekend after. How do you approach it? There's so many things going on behind the scenes in a round robin. It's just so hard to call week on week.
So you're not reading too much into Kilkenny's performance?
Look, I don't want to be kind of turning sideways and saying, look, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. And the things that came up again was the lack of midfield, the lack of forward play. Like, our best forward was nearly Cian Kenny, and he's just a young lad. He's 20 years of age, which is great to see from a Kilkenny's perspective. But you need more out of maybe the Owen Cody's. You know, TJ Reid was in and out of it. Billy Ryan came on. You know, it's the old failings, and it's kind of, if Kilkenny don't dominate the game physically and don't win the battle, I suppose like all games, if you don't dominate the games, you know, in the intense battle, the hard work, the fight, you're not going to win it. And Kilkenny, when they don't do that, they don't win. At the minute, when they do it, they're only winning by 3 or 4 points. So when they don't, they're going to be beaten, and that's what I'd be kind of worried about. And Pádraig Welch only coming on, I don't understand Pádraig Welch only coming on. Maybe he was injured, there's rumours he was, but if my eyes, if you're injured, you're not there, you're not playing. So if you come on, you're not injured. And he came on with only 3 minutes to go. You know, Walter Welch was started and John Donnelly. He hasn't got a settled team, and that's what I'm worried about.
Is that because they knew they were already through? Do we need to sometimes bear that in mind, that the psychology of a match where you're going out to physically try and impose yourself on an opponent, it's great if you really have something to play for, but if you've got not that much to play for, you can't just get up to the emotional pitch that you need to get to.
Yeah, absolutely, Jerry. Yeah, there's 2 things on that from my view. I think they really, really went for Dublin in Parnell Park, because that was a massive, massive game in my eyes. If they lost that game, they were going into into Nolan Park where they had to win against Wexford. So I think coming out of Dublin, they threw everything at Dublin, and they were coming off a bit of a high, giving a bit of a trimming. And then Kilkenny's perspective, they were looking at a Wexford side who drew to Westmeath. No disrespect to Westmeath. Westmeath are actually doing very well in this championship after having a great campaign, and are actually a very good team, and are after driving a lot of the top teams close to the end. But Kilkenny were looking at it, probably saying Wexford are after dropping a bit, you know, drawing with Westmeath, coming into the Lions Den, Nolan Park, we should be winning this one. And then from a Wexford perspective, they were coming off the back of they should be beating Westmeath. Now they have to win in Nolan Park. So I think the psychology of both teams were at total different spectrums. And Kilkenny were saying, right, we should win it, and Wexford were saying, right, we have to win it. And if you look at Wexford lately, they do not fear coming to Nolan Park whatsoever. They don't fear Kilkenny anymore as much as they did. They have been beating them underage. So they were well up for this game. And, listen to Davy Fitz even last night there. He was saying that these boys don't fear Kilkenny at all. And they would have expected to beat Kilkenny even at times. So psychology of games, different weekends, that's what I talked about beforehand. It's hard to balance it.
I think last weekend as well, we wrote off the league entirely. We said if you look at Leinster, you look at Munster, the league just does not matter whatsoever. And one of those storylines was Wexford after the draw with Westmeath. So all of a sudden, are we looking at some of the things that happened to Wexford in the league on a positive level and saying, okay, those storylines are absolutely maintaining their way through the championship now, and Wexford absolutely have a chance of going maybe to an All-Ireland semi-final at least here?
Yeah, as I said, Wexford are a bit of a conundrum. To be honest, I couldn't see him going to a semi-final. I think Wexford are a type of a team that if they get all their balls in place, and if they get the right team, and if they get a bit of luck on the day, and every one of them play really well, and they get their strategy good, that they can beat any team on their day. But I think consistently, they're not good enough to win week on week. They just haven't got the players, and I don't know if they have the actual kind of mentality to kind of put it up to the teams week on week. Physically, I think they're not up to it. But in saying that, they could beat any team on their day.
But they fancy themselves against a Clare team coming off a beating from Limerick. Would they fancy themselves against a Limerick team coming off a beating from Clare? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. No, I wouldn't think so. As I said, I think they're very lucky to get through. I think they know themselves they're very lucky to get through. They'll be probably playing a Joe McDonough team now, which will probably suit them. They'll get a bit of momentum there, but I just don't think it's in them to get past the bigger teams. Like there's teams in the championship now, Ger, and they're really beginning to get momentum. Like if you look at the Munster Championship and the Leinster Championship, the three teams coming out of Munster will be very, very happy the way they've come out of it. Like if you look at Cork, they've really, really changed their whole season around. And if anything, all the negative talk and all the kind of chat beforehand about how Cork are going, that's after unifying this Cork team, I feel. And yes, they've absolutely made changes. They've changed their game plan. They're gone more direct. And we've always talked about Cork being a summer team. And if you look at the way the championship is, realistically, it's only kind of coming into summer now, even though the championship is nearly halfway over, but it's the 23rd of May. But the ground is going to harden up. It's going to be a summer atmosphere, and that's where Cork really relish. And then if you look at Clare, they've just come out of the blue. Like, who would have said that Clare would have topped the group and in a Munster final? And they made 6 changes the weekend. Obviously, Lohan took the game very importantly because the Munster final at stake. But still, he said to his players that there's places up for grabs. They didn't drop at intensity whatsoever, so they're in a great position. And then if you look at Limerick, they're unbeaten. They were out players like Gillette at stages. They were out Kyle Hayes, Keane Lynch, but they're still unbeaten and they're still in a Munster final, And from a Leinster point of view, if you look at them teams, Kilkenny, they're hit and miss a small bit. Galway are kind of stumbling over teams but still winning, and Wexford barely got through. So I think on a Leinster point of view, the teams would be kind of maybe a small bit more worried about their form. But in saying that, one game could just change the whole thing.
Those concerns that you have on Wexford in particular about the physicality and the mentality in those big games, did Saturday not change that at all in your view? The fact that like Lee Chin had one of his best games in a while for Wexford.
It's starting as well.
Yeah, that's a huge addition, and they needed to win. Like this, like you say, Kilkenny had nothing to play for. Like there was a permutation that Kilkenny could have got eliminated from Leinster, so it wasn't like they were completely up against a lame duck at the weekend. Is there nothing that you saw on Saturday that would make you question just those questions you would have had around that Wexford mentality?
Oh no, absolutely, yeah. And Kilkenny, I didn't mean to say that Kilkenny had nothing to play for. Kilkenny absolutely had something to play for. Wexford were coming. First of all, we're coming to Nolan Park, which I know for a fact Cody would have talked about it and said this is the Lions' den. No one buddies is on our own patch. All them statements would have been made in the dressing room, and they still beat Kilkenny. But what I'm saying about Wexford is, yes, on their day, that when they're playing the bigger teams, they can absolutely build momentum and get up to that tier. But I think to get up for one victory and beat them, that's nearly sufficient for Wexford. And I don't think they have the players or even the physicality or the mentality to go on and win a semi-final, because if you have to think of the other teams as well, they'll be building, and they'll be coming with the same mentality. It's coming to knockout stages now, and as we've seen, teams with their backs against the wall tend to kind of play better. There's more of a fight in them, there's more of an intensity to them. So I think whoever Wexford are going to play next will be coming in the same boat as, say, Wexford will be as well. So you'll have, say, the McDonagh teams, you'll have maybe the Munster teams. Everyone now is going to be building momentum. Everyone's back is against the walls. It's do or die now at this stage, nearly in the championship. And I think Wexford won't be getting up to the same level as the other teams.
Let's talk a little bit about what happened to Waterford. What did happen? What's your instinct about what's gone on there over the last 8 weeks? Is it since we were like, this guy's potential manager of the year material, everything's going great. They've got the club monkey off their back. They've got a national title. They've got the deepest panel we've ever seen them have. It's phenomenal.
I really don't know what's after happening in Waterford, and it's massive. It's really, like, if you look at Tipperary, right, they have from won a match in the championship, but they've lost so many players. They had a new management in place. They have new lads on the block that have to make their names yet. But as you said, Gerard, with Waterford, they had everything in place. They had a manager of Liam Cahill, really good manager. We talked about him, 3 years on the run. The only thing I can probably see, and now you'd love to know what's inside the camp about what's going on. You'd imagine it was happy after the league final. Even the way he took the cup in the league final, he was kind of saying, yeah, better things down the line. We were expecting it, and it never came to fruition. And I just think, were they overtrained? Did they peak too soon with the new structure in the year? There's a lot of injuries. De Burke went off early with a kind of muscle injury. Jamie Barron went off injured with a muscle injury. It just looked like they peaked too soon. And I think with Waterford as well, they had no consistency in the picking of their team. So their team has been changed around an awful lot. And De Burke went back full back, Austin Cleason centre back, Jamie Barron corner forward. Stephen Bennett totally went out of the scene altogether. It's just so hard to put your finger on it, because they were just going so well. So, were they overtrained? Did they peak too soon? Did they think they were a team that were did they get ahead of themselves? Were they humble enough to take victory and knowing what's coming down the blocks? But they really just looked disjointed. We talked about a panel. You'd wonder about the Iron Fist and the way it's managed. And Liam Cahill, we tend to know, does manage with kind of an iron fist, and look, it's his way or the highway, and rightly so, he is the manager. But players have to buy into that as well. And players maybe not starting, it's fine when you're winning and things like that, but then there's rumblings kind of.
Well, let me specifically ask you about those, because a big deal was made in the aftermath about the team being leaked. Teams, I don't know if teams being leaked is a big deal or not. A team goes in the middle of the week for publication in the match programme, and players get informed. They tell their family, they tell people close to them. I'd say most counties, most teams, most weeks, somebody somewhere knows the team. Is it that big a deal? Like, if they'd won that game yesterday, would we be talking about this? Or is it actually sacrosanct, you tell nobody, and it's a real sign that something has been breached? What's your take on that?
Yeah, my take on it, Les, would be there'll be something in it. I do think there's something in it. I think, teams get out, different teams get out, but I just suppose, just remember back in my day, I would have never told the team. I would have never heard the team back from somebody else. So I think there is something in it. And I think the big thing about that, telling the team is not a big deal. It's breaking the dressing room code, I suppose. That's what you're really talking about, and the spirit in the dressing room. And I think there is something in it, and I think letting the team out, teams get out, but I think it's more so it's kind of a coating. Now, that wouldn't have been said in the dressing room, but it's easy to say it after the game that team is leaked, and I think it's John Monahan was saying it, but I think there is something in it, and I wonder what else was leaked maybe during the week, or what was said, or what wasn't been said. But as I said, it's easy to say it now when they're after been losing. Yeah. Do you know, that kind of way?
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting that you think there is something in it. Then the other thing,
I think there is.
The other thing that I was like, I think Liam Cahill's going to end up being a great manager, and it might not be with this group of players. I do feel like sometimes you can try and fix something that's gone wrong, but this isn't football. They're not professionals, And when something like this happens, if you go back one last year, it can frequently be a lost year where you're trying loads of different things, you're making accommodations, you're going against your own instinct. That actually the best thing for him might be to step away and say, I'm going to have to learn from this experience, whatever it was that went wrong, but I'm not going to be able to do it with these players. I don't know, again, what your instinct is and whether or not he should have one more crack at it and try and fix what happened, or if that's actually just spending good money after bad.
Yeah, my initial gut is telling me it's probably time to step away, because I just think he had everything in place, and I just think it was set up for him. Now, it's easy me saying that, and I think Liam Cahill would be a great manager, but it's also a big learning curve for Liam. This is his first real inter-county senior team. Yeah, he's done really good underage. He's done really good with Tipperary underage, but this is a different level, and I suppose it's massive. It's massive to learn. You need to know what's been happening in the camp, how training has been going, what the vibe in training has been, what the body language in training. I think the Cork game last weekend really took the wind out of their sail. That was a must-win for both teams, and they went to Walsh Park, and Cork annihilated them. And I think that really, really was a sucker punch of where do we go from here. They had 7 days to recover. Mentality-wise, we talked about already, psychology-wise, coming down off a game like that, building yourself back up. And when there's doubts in your team, it just sets the tone for the whole panel. And then maybe, as we talked about, the physical side of it, being overtrained and maybe a bit of tiredness, it all accumulates. And that's how management is just such a fine line. And it's a learning curve for Liam. As I said, there'll be a lot of people talking this morning about where did it go wrong. We'll have all the experts, and it's just so hard to put your finger on it. But really, you have to be in the dressing room, and you have to get the vibe. There's a vibe in the air in dressing rooms that you can just pick up on. And I'd love to know what the vibe was all week.
If Waterford want to learn from the mistakes of this year, is Liam Cahill not the best man to help them learn from those mistakes next season, given he would have been partly responsible for them?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. I suppose I did kind of say maybe this time to walk away, but he's there 3 years. But yeah, in saying that, maybe he'll see the mistakes that they did make and things that they need to work on. I'd love to see Waterford in the league next year. How importantly
lose every
they
game.
Take it. They take it. This is it. And about resting, they talk about a panel. Like maybe the likes of Tadhg de Burka and Jamie Barron and Gleeson, these lads, maybe they just need a bit of a break. They're going to get a break now. They're going to get a 6 months break till January, literally. I know they're back in November and stuff, but do they just need a rest and a break? And maybe you're right. Maybe Liam is the man to come back and just make one more crack at it and learn from his lessons and take on next year. But there'll be an awful lot of pressure on Waterford next year and Liam Cahill next year. And do Waterford deal that well with pressure? I'm not so sure. But another management could destroy the whole thing again.
The other factor in all of this is the potential of external forces here, which weren't strong enough to lure Liam Cahill away to Tipperary last year. Like, are the Tip County Board monitoring the situation and see the value in Liam Cahill and see the age profile of their current team and think now could be the time to try and strike while the iron is hot? Or do they trust Bonner to kind of take them into next year themselves and continue their path from this low base they're at?
Yeah, I think they'll have to trust Bonner, really. There was talks about Liam Cahill going in last year and the County Board beat them and stuff, and Liam going to Waterford. So that was probably a statement from Liam in itself. Now, I can see Liam obviously training Tipperary at some stage. But I think it's up to Bonner. Bonner took on the mantle. He's at the blood in a lot of players. And I think for me, they should stick with Bonner rather than just to be fierce unfair to get rid of Bonner just after 1 year. In the championship where he didn't even win a match, so he'll want another crack at it as well. And how did the county board take Liam Cahill not taking the Tipperary job? It's a massive opportunity. It was your own county, and he still went with Waterford. So would they be too keen to ask Liam back? Maybe not. I'm not too sure. And the flip side of it is Liam has trained a lot of these players that are coming into the Tip team now. They've trained him minor, he trained him under 21, so he knows these guys. So would he be the best man? But for me, I believe in Bonner there, absolutely.
Can I just ask then on Cork, if you were a Cork player, a member of the Cork management right now, would you be more confident of them winning in All-Ireland this year than last year? Granted, they were in the final last year but got annihilated. Does it feel that they've made that step forward over the last 2 weeks alone?
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is crazy, you know. Like 2 weeks, I actually had written down there, I think a few weeks ago, that the best players weren't getting on the ball. They were too slow. They weren't direct enough. They weren't scoring goals. And all of a sudden, in 2 weeks, the whole thing has just changed. Like, it's not as if I gave the sheet to Kingston right now and he looked at it and said, "Oh, I made the change all these." But it is amazing, and I do think they're in a better position team-wise because of all the controversy at the beginning of the year. Tipperary in 2010. Got annihilated by Cork in a Munster semi-final, I think it was, and there were talks about that they were finished, that they were done, and they went on and won the All-Ireland, beating ourselves for the 5 in a row that year, and turned out to be a phenomenal team. So I think the biggest thing for Cork this year was all the negative talk, all the way they're playing is not the way they play. They're not good enough. I think that will set a bit of steel in them, set a bit of fight in them. And you know what? It's nearly Cork against the rest of the country now, you know, and I know that feeling, you know. And they're really, after changing their game, they're gone direct. They're getting goals. They have an out ball now in Connolly there, you know, and the ground is going to be hardening, and they're going to be getting into bigger pitches. And I think with that, with the momentum and everything else that's gone behind the scenes, I think they'll really be a really hard team to beat now, all of a sudden.
And the schedule's pretty good for them. You can see how they could easily build in over the next while, whereas actually being in a Munster final and losing that game, not great for the morale and the confidence.
Or else Antrim will just beat them.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah, imagine that. But
very 2022.
I think it's great. I think a Munster final, I don't think Cork, like, win the Munster final is great, but I don't think that's their ambition. And I think they'll have a great run in meeting one of the Joe McDonagh teams, get more momentum and be flying come a quarter-final stage.
Owen is yerring the Joe McDonagh final there.
I think the draw's been done, because
right, so we already know.
I think it's going to be Kerry, Wexford and Antrim, Cork, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously if Kerry win the McDonagh Cup.
So you don't get a reward for winning the...
I would think because it's a Munster versus a Leinster team, technically Antrim being a Leinster team, it's got to be, I think that's it. I'm 90% sure.
It's just like the Nations League, it's very obvious. Taggy, good stuff, thanks a million.
Thanks, guys.
Aidan Taggy Fogarty giving us his thoughts this morning on wild weekend in the hurling in some ways, and also it was good that they managed to get everything done and dusted in the first 15 minutes so that you could flick over and watch the football.
Yeah, that was it. You
like, hang on,
dual screen on the football then.
Hang on, what? This game's over. Once the penalty was saved and the goal went in the other end, you're like, okay, grand, game over.
Yeah, like it does. There was such possibilities for drama at the weekend, and Galway being way too good for Dublin really eradicated any real drama on Saturday night, because there were 9 points apiece at one stage well into the first half. You were kind of seeing it on the bottom of the screen on Sky Sports, and you thought, wow, Kilkenny could be going out here, which would have been sensational if Dublin managed to kick on. And then yesterday was just a non-event, but it does get you really, really excited for what's about to come this summer.